Sean. Keep you up to date on trading as we talk politics here on Balance of Power. Welcome to the Tuesday edition. We're live from Washington the day after the budget dropped, the day the earth shook. It was right around this time, high noon, as the president took the wraps off. What we are told is an aspirational statement, a statement of values, not something that can pass the House or the Senate. Of course, that would go for anything probably that he sent up there right now. But we wanted to pick through this massive 188 pages of proposed legislation and talk a little bit more about what could be important news in the effort, or at least the road to legalizing marijuana, with our friend Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior U.S. Policy Analyst. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Doing well. I hope you've recovered from Budget Day. I know that's a big night out for BI. You guys really push it. But now that you've had a chance to spend some time on this, people have seized on the obvious stuff. Try to hike taxes on the wealthy and corporations, maybe a child care tax credit, some of the themes that have followed this president. You've been drilling down, though, interestingly, on something that's important that we need to keep our eyes on, which is housing.
Yeah, the budget, look, you don't need me to tell you that it's not going to pass.
Sure.
But, it's a great document because you can take it, print it out, stuff it in your desk, or save it as a PDF because if you're not printing, and dust it off if President Biden wins re-election, because there are a lot of aspirational nuggets in there. Mm-hmm. And we were looking at the housing finance one in particular because there's a lot of stuff happening in the Senate Banking Committee today on that. Also, we saw President Biden say this as part of his State of the Union address, a $400 tax credit, monthly tax credit. And so when it comes to housing, this is something that I think that you're not seeing any regulatory actions or just lots of ideas out there. And so if President Biden wins next year, look for this to be one of his top, what we would call maybe agency priorities. Like, I don't think the White House would say, well, certainly they'd probably say it's a top priority. Yeah. But you may starting to see rules and legislation pop out to try and make housing more affordable. Mortgage originations in the United States were in a bloodbath in 2023.
Yeah, right.
They sort of stabilized in 2024, but they're not really changing. Obviously, a lot has to deal with rates, but look for these policy solutions to come back into play. And so, I just think, again, look at the Biden document, the budget document as a way to just try and predict where he's going to focus if he wins next year.
It's a roadmap.
Exactly.
For a second term, potentially. They're targeting young home buyers here for good reason. The political implications would help Joe Biden in the election. Could they see a benefit meaningfully between now and then if none of this gets passed?
Nah, I think, obviously the $400 a month, tax credit, that's something that voters can say, look, I know what $400 is. I know $400 in my pocket per month is. Yeah. I like that. So
I may not be getting it, but I'll vote for the guy in case.
I think that's more of just like, it's just pure politics at this point. It was a campaign speech, as you know.
Sure.
So, but again, none of it's going to pass Congress this year. Even if, we had a Congress that was more amicable to bipartisan solutions, it's not really going to pass. There's not much that they can do between now and the elections. But again, if Biden wins next year or later in November, if you get a Congress that's more favorable to his policies and so forth like that, don't be surprised. But also we would just state is that a lot of this he can do unilaterally without Congress via Treasury or the IRS.
Right.
That just takes time. You need to have people in place. And so, you have the $7.3 trillion budget out there saying, here's all these great things that we can look at and so forth. But, none of it's really going to happen this year.
Well, let's talk more broadly about what might happen, because I'm guessing around budget time, your phone starts to ring again. And we don't even have to talk about the real budget. We've got 2 weeks to avoid another shutdown here. This is the second part of the spending plan to get through this fiscal year, about halfway through it. And defense spending is going to come up. This is, I know, important to a lot of terminal users. They want to know what's going to happen to defense contractors. We've got Homeland Security. We've got Health and Human Services. A lot of implications here for corporate America.
Yeah, so 3/4 of the government will shut down if they're not funded past March 22nd. And Senator Schumer even made a statement today that didn't bode well. He said it's just going to be very tough. I'm paraphrasing here, but he didn't make it seem like they were going to come to an agreement by March 22nd. But as we all know, Congress has a really good, they are really good at something called kicking the can.
Sure.
And if they don't get it done by March 22nd, they can kick a can even more. That date that they have to be worried about is April 30th. That's when they have the 1% sequester. And that's when the Department of Defense, among all the other agencies that aren't funded, would come in and have that 1% cut. And so I don't be surprised if you see this negative language. This is how it always happens until 2 nights before, 1 night before they come to an agreement.
Right.
But we are telling our investors, our clients and so forth, that we really don't need to pay much attention to the government shutdown. I don't think there's going to be one. I honestly don't think there's even going to be a sequester issue. And so a lot of these contractor stocks, I think, are just fine to go for right now.
Interesting. Okay. Well, okay, so let's take the shutdown off the table for a moment quickly then. And what that second mini bus or mega bus, whatever we're calling it, is going to look like specifically for defense spending. I know they negotiated top line numbers, but there's still a lot of work to be done here, right?
Well, yeah, I honestly, I don't even think Congress is going to be able to get to that. I mean, they're going to have
Really?
the top line number.
And then you just go for it.
And they just go for it. I
Vote.
mean, I think what they'll do is they will have to just come up with some type of baseline off of 2023 numbers and just, because look, we just don't have the time. And the problem, this is where the budget comes in. The White House is saying, look, I've already given you 2024.
Yeah.
I expect you, because they have to get that done by September 30th. They won't, but, or I should say, they don't really have to. They can always kick the can on that. But, we've got essentially 2 scenarios playing here. Congress is still focused on 2023. The White House is focused on 2024. All the numbers are going back and forth. People are being confused.
What could go
and
wrong?
the easiest solution here is just to say, you know what, top line numbers, put it out there 72 hours before votes, get it into a situation where there's really no substantial changes, just keep the party going.
Sure. We're spending time with our friend Nathan Dean at Bloomberg Intelligence. I have to ask you about this Wall Street Journal story that I saw over the weekend on an issue that we have talked about a bit. And it has to do with rescheduling marijuana. This was on the 11th, something that you've been talking about quite a bit here, the DEA pushing back on loosening marijuana laws and specifically rescheduling. It looks like this might happen soon.
Yeah.
But there's concern within the agency that the administration is on the wrong track.
Well, so I think there's 2 things. One, if you're an investor in marijuana equities right now, you have this, I think the consensus is reschedulization is going to happen.
Yep.
We think it's
You've
70%.
been consistent about
Correct.
that, by the way, for everyone listening and watching.
We think it's a 70% chance that reschedulization happens because President Biden used 12 words in his State of the Union to talk about marijuana. That didn't get there by accident. It's not like they just said, hey, you know what, I'm going to off the cuff.
Okay.
But what the Wall Street Journal article is talking about is there is tremendous amount of opposition to this in the DEA. If you're a career DEA agent, think about it. You've lost friends and family and people over the last 30 to 40 years fighting against marijuana. And now it's beginning to go the other way. Now, I think that's a very strong argument, but the reason why I think the DEA will eventually go forward with reschedulization is the momentum in the United States. All you have to do is look at the state changes that are coming out. The momentum in the United States is leading towards decriminalization or legalization. You're not going to get that at a federal level, but this is just one small step that they can use to put it on that path.
Well, I have to say, you were ahead of everybody on this because you were also the first to bring us these concerns within the agency. Does that inform your timeline at all?
I could see Washington. Look, Washington could be a little funny and say, hey, let's do this at April 20th and so forth like that. Usually that's...
The DEA isn't going to do that.
No, they're not going to do that. That's more reserved for the Senate.
Would
but,
be a day.
But it's going to happen. It's a political decision. So the question is that's going over the White House is if they've made this decision that they are going to reschedule marijuana, when can we put it out there for the best impact for the elections? But from the investment community, what I would say is they will put out a statement. You'll see the equities respond to it. But along with that statement is going to come with a proposed rule. That proposed rule has to go through the Administrative Procedures Act.
Okay.
They may not finalize that before the election. And if President Trump wins and he decides he's not on board with this, things could change.
So the 420 ads are coming to the campaign as well. Is
possibly.
what you're saying. Chuck Schumer, in our last moment here, said at some point this year, safe banking, we're just going to keep hearing that every year.
I still don't think safe banking is going to act or is going to pass. Primarily, I think there's opposition at the House Financial Services Committee, specifically Patrick McHenry, the chairman. If the Safe Banking Act were to pass the House, I'd be much more favorable. But look, I've been
That's
burned.
the hurdle.
I've been burnt on safe banking before. I said it was going to pass in the last congressional session. I'm not going to move it until I actually see more support there.
You feel like you've seen this movie before.
Exactly.